Hey, what's going on, role players? It's the Bard here. Welcome back to the corner. So today we're going to be discussing the Bladesinger. Bladesinger is actually a really exciting topic for me because when I very first started role playing, I played an Elven Fighter Mage in 2nd edition. So when kind of 3rd and 3.5 came out and I saw the Bladesinger class, it seemed like I was going back to my roots, and it seemed like a natural progression. However, it's a class that never really got off the ground. There was enough in it that made it interesting, but it kind of fell short, usually in the spellcasting. And even though it was a nice class, it just never really worked. But now 5th edition's got the Bladesinger in the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, and I think it can work. I just think we needed to put in a lot of groundwork first. So Bladesinger is a class that's Elven specific, or Elf or half-Elf specific. And this is something that will probably turn a lot of people off, because I know that there are a lot of people out there who don't like elves. This is something that I never really understood myself. It's a case of people saying, well, elves are too this, or elves are too that, or they're too much like this. And it's like, well, no, just make the character your own. You know, make it whatever you want it to be. I think one of the big turn-offs for elves always used to be their reduction in constitution. So what happens now is we've got pretty much the same thing. Elves are still the same. They haven't changed, except now you're getting plus to everything that is relevant to your race, but no minuses. So it's not really the big issue that it was before. But it's still a mage at heart, and it's still frail, even with their increase to D6 in life. Now, if you remember what I said before, fighters who try to mage are only ever going to improve because they have the wizard's bag of tricks to fall back on. But wizards who try to fight are usually going to fail because they're trying to downgrade, because wizards are typically top tier when it comes to effectiveness. This is why magic got huge nerfs in 5th edition. In some ways now, the fighter mage, or the equivalent of, is even less desirable, because what used to be the case was a fighter never runs out of swings. That was always the argument, whereas a mage had a limited spell pool per day. In 3rd edition, you could go with reserve feats, which would allow you a small continual use ability as long as you kept one of your big spells in reserve. So, because reserve feat, you would always be able to fire off something. But that's not the case anymore. Now we have cantrips, and you can just fire off what you want when you want all the time. So you don't really need to be able to swing a sword, but sometimes you just need steel. And I think that is what keeps the Bladesinger competitive. And that's the important thing. It needs to be up there with the rest of the team. It needs to have a function, it needs to perform a task, and it needs to not hold anyone back. Alright then, so first and foremost, never forget what you are. You are a mage after all. So you want to have a very clear-cut idea of the kind of mage you want to be. Second of all, it's very easy to slip into the warrior mindset with this character. When you start swinging your sword and you start getting into combat, it's very easy to think, I'm going to go in, I'm going to cut everything down, I'm going to tank up all the blows, and then I'm going to, walk out. It's not like that. Not like that at all. You haven't got the hit points, you haven't really got the armor to withstand an assault like that. You need to rely on quick hit and run tactics, and you need to make deft use of your dexterity and your intelligence. Now, if your dexterity is really high and your intelligence is really high as well, then you can get in there and tank it up in the extreme, but only if your scores are good. If your scores are bad, really consider exactly what spells you're going to take, which are going to either stack up with or override your defenses. So your best scores are going to be dexterity and intelligence. Your next best score really wants to be constitution, because you can't afford to not have enough hit points. The more you've got, the better. And you don't really have many. So you're naturally going to get some high dexterity, because you're going to get a +2. If you choose to go high elf, which you probably would, you're going to get the intelligence boost as well, so that's an extra +1 there. So if you can get something like 20 dexterity. If you do roll a natural 18, it might be worth putting it into dexterity. You know, there's so much good stuff that comes out of it, and it's really great for the Elven Bladesinger. Your intelligence also does need to be high. If you need to, don't be afraid to put an ability score increase into intelligence when the time comes, around about level 4. There aren't really many feats you need to consider. You could go for defensive duelist if and only if your scores aren't really up to scratch. If they are really good, you can probably skip that and then go with Warcaster, which is really, really nice, and it fits the theme very nicely, and it has a number of practical uses which you're going to find useful for the build. So we're going to assume you've got some fairly average scores, and we're going to go with Warcaster. Before we get too sidetracked with that, we need to consider the abilities that you're getting by choosing Bladesinger. Now, some of the mage abilities are amazing in the other schools, such as Abjurations and its shield, Divination and its rerolls, and things like Conjuration and Transmutation. They have some really, really strong utilities in there as well. So there's a lot of good choices in just going pure mage. However, if we're going to go Bladesinger, then we need to make every advantage count, because as I've said before, mages who try to fight usually don't do a good job of it. So you really need to abuse every single thing that you can get. Don't be afraid to pop Bladesong every fight. If you're having more than 2 fights, chances are that you're in a lot of trouble, and you probably should bug out and call it an evening anyway. I mean, think about this. If your party is going out and they get into one combat, and then somewhere along the day they get into another combat, that's pretty much acceptable. But if you're getting into more combats than that, there's something really crazy happening. Now, this is one of the arguments I've heard against Bladesong, that you pretty much only get 2 uses out of it. Combat doesn't last, a minute. Very rarely does combat last 10 rounds. It's easily enough for you to make full advantage of. Plus, the 10-foot speed increase is nice as well. And, the bonus on reflex abilities is also a nice advantage. So, one to really consider. So it's great to have the extra speed, because you're going to want to take the long way around in most situations. You can't afford to get hit. Even though your AC is nice and high, because you've got a high dex, you've got mage armor on, you might have some enchanted gear, and your Bladesong is active, it's still not worth risking the attacks, because sometimes they are going to get the natural 20s. Your DM is going to make it a point of pride to hit you. Just because you've got the tools doesn't mean that you should, neglect your tactical approach. So always keep that in mind. And if you keep that in mind, you stop feeling like a fighter and remember that you're a wizard as well. Now, the obvious exception to this is dungeons. If you're in a dungeon, you're running around and you're opening doors and you're finding creatures and you're having combats and they're small combats, then you want to save the Bladesongs instead. Because if there's a lot of rooms, lots of small combats, then you don't want to run out of them, especially if you think there's something big coming up. If you're concerned about your overall capacity for retaining hit points, that is the best time to pop your Bladesong. End of. If you think, alright, look, there's a big ogre, those things knock out enough damage, it's worth getting your Bladesong up. If you're up against a group of 4 orcs or something, it's not quite as necessary. So situation, really. But as I said before, when you're out and about, you can afford to pop it every time. When you're in a myriad of small encounters, then it's just time to change your tactics up. But then again, you're a mage, you should be able to do this on the fly. Alright, well, moving on to level 6 and you get your second attack. There really isn't anything I need to say about this that hasn't already been said before, or isn't plainly obvious to see. 2 attacks are just straight up better than 1. There's no reason not to take them. So if that's the case, and you are making more use of your attacks than you are your spells, then by all means feel free to chuck haste into the mix as well. So at level 10, you've got your Song of Defense, and by now you've got enough hit points to pretty much hold your own for a few rounds anyway, unsupported. Providing, of course, you've got a few decent defense spells up. So maybe like Mirror Image or something like that, it's a good one. Or Blur isn't a terrible choice either. It comes down to personal preference. So what I would say is by the time you hit level 10, And when your Blade Song's running and you got your Song of Defense, it states that you get to sacrifice a spell, multiply that number by 5 for the spell slot, and then reduce that much damage. I think the best use for this is after some sort of energy attack. Because what will naturally happen with physical attacks, you're going to find that it's either hit or miss against your AC, which is usually kind of high with your Blade Song running. So most of those aren't going to be an issue. But the way energy defenses tend to work is that a lot of spells offer resistance, which is just halving what you take. Now, even if you're halving something and you're also getting a good reflex save against it, which, is realistic in terms of the Bladesinger with a high dexterity, you still run the risk of taking quite a fair bit of energy damage. So once the resistance is kicked in, then that quick use of the Song of Defense should at least minimize the damage to a manageable level. And that's what I think the best use of it is for. Other than that, you want to rely on your footwork, rely on your AC for like physical stuff, and then hopefully that should get you through until you're in a better position where you can kind of team up with the rest of your party. So by the time you hit level 14, you get to add your intelligence modifier to the damage that your melee attacks do while your Blade Song is up. Whilst this isn't a bad thing in general, and it's kind of nice if you've got multiple attacks and haste and all that kind of stuff on the go, and you're in a good position where you can get attacks of opportunity and that kind of thing, it's not really that useful that I would find. By the time you're level 14, you've got 7th level spells, and some of those are just like instant death spells. It's not a superfluous thing, but at the same time, you want to be weighing up how much value am I getting out of extra damage per attack as opposed to a particular spell. And then you have to consider the fact of, do you get a critical on any of these? Are you going to be applying any extra modifiers from weapon? So you really need to run your calcs, do your numbers, and find out what is giving you the best outcome. Is it multiple attacks with the additional intelligence damage added on, or is it your spells? So really consider. Like I said, I don't think it's superfluous. I just think it's something that isn't going to be as reliable or as practical as time goes on, especially once you get beyond those levels into 17, 18, 19. As far as your spells go, just check your coverage. I mean, you're pretty good up close because you've got your rapier, so maybe you want a few cantrips which are sort of ranged base. Ray of Frost is pretty good because it's going to reduce enemy speed, and whilst your Blade Song is up, you've got a bonus to speed, so them getting close to you isn't really as big an issue. But don't neglect things like Shocking Grasp. It's really good, especially if we're going to go with something like Warcaster, because if they do choose to move away from you and they provoke, then a Shocking Grasp for 3d8 or even 4d8 depending on your level is pretty good damage. Also, it's single target specific, so other spells like Melf's Acid Arrow or even Finger of Death, because again they're single target spells, again they do respectable damage. Melf's isn't as good as it used to be, and it's not really up there with spells like Scorching Ray. But what Melf's does give you is, I think it's a Mage Slayer personally. Any mage that's considering using concentration-based magic, as soon as if you're holding and you fire, there's a chance for them to lose the spell, and then when they take damage on their round afterwards, again they just have to make that concentration check. And concentration checks, they usually go either way in this game, I find. So it is literally down to the luck of the dice. So consider it. Just consider it, because it just keeps forcing additional concentration rolls, so it is a good anti-mage tactic. Other great spells to include would definitely be Misty Step, being able to duck in or duck out of combat as is applicable, so it's a good high mobility one. And again, mobility is kind of your thing, you really need to rely on that a lot. Mirror Image is also a classic spell, and what's so great about Mirror Image is it's not concentration based. You fire it up and you leave it and it carries on. If a critical hit does come your way, then there's a good chance that it will hit an image. if you've got plenty of them still standing. Shield is also a good choice. It's your anti-magic missile spell, and protection from energy is your anti-element spell. So, you want your defenses to be absolutely tip-top. If you have room, to put extra defensive spells in, take them. Just take them. And then I think after that, you could probably just go with like utility. Any kind of utility wizard-based spells, because you are, like I said, like I keep saying, you're still the mage. The players are going to be relying on you to fix problems that they can't. Consider all the classics, like Alarm is great, especially because it's ritual-based. The shelter spells, which are great if you're out adventuring in the wilderness. And pretty much anything like... I know a lot of people like Fly. Fly's good. I like Gaseous Form, actually. It's a great one if your party gets captured, and locked down under mundane means. If you've got a gaseous form ready, you can literally just slip out of the bars, have a good scout around, and then you can kind of come back. And if you are in a position where you can free your companions, then go for it. Gaseous form. I think it's a really, really good one. Haste should also be in your arsenal. I do consider it more utility than direct offense and defense, but it's an amazing spell that really kind of covers all three, because there is a lot to it. Double speed along with your Blade Song speed increase is ridiculous. How fast you can move within a round. Your AC bonus is great. Advantage on your dex saves is nice. The additional attack if you choose to attack, but remember, it also gives you those extra actions: the dash, the disengage, hide, use an object. Use an object is great for spellcasters because using magical objects. So yeah, haste. It's great in attack and great in combat, but it's also a really good utility spell. So pretty much in summary, I think Bladesinger is a good fifth character. Once you've got like pretty much everything down. But also it's like a good role filler. If you're lacking a fighter, or you're lacking a wizard, or you're lacking a rogue, then you can kind of take that place to a degree. So it's not one that's so dedicated in style, but again, because you're still getting your full spellcasting capacity from your wizard levels, you still are a mage at heart, like I keep saying. So what then tends to happen is that those abilities just become like add-ons, bolt-ons, extra kind of freebies to just keep your defense good. And that's a really great thing about it, because if you are using those abilities to keep your defenses good and keep yourself protected, then you can actually focus more on the spellcasting element if you need to. So you don't have to necessarily attack all the time, and you don't necessarily have to spell all the time. You get to mix it up. You get to have a lot of fun by being flexible in your approach to combat. And, you get a lot of opportunities then to use your spells for other things. Whereas what tends to happen is... mages normally have their abilities, like say the transmutation ability for the transmuter is going to be more out of combat focused. You can then really kind of mix up your spells a lot as the Bladesinger, because you don't need quite so many of them to protect yourself during the actual combat encounters. So there are lots of bonuses to that. So looking at the Bladesinger at a glance, it's kind of nice. I do like it. There are some fun and interesting ideas in there. If you'd like me to go into maybe a more detailed build, then I will definitely consider that if there's enough interest in it. You guys know the routine already. You like, you comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And I will see you guys next time at the gaming table.